Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About the Aviva Premiership season. I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul, and thank you for joining me. What I'm going to talk about is this season and how I think it might not have been as strong as previous seasons as well. But before I get on to that, if you're watching live, please do put comments below. It is much appreciated. And also this Let's Talk is brought to you by DrivingMaul. Myself, that's right, I'm going to sponsor myself as I've got no other sponsors. Link above is for Patreon, which means you can help support me produce more of these videos for as little as $1 a month. So yes, it's a monthly donation thing, so please do click on that and sign up and help me do more of these if you like them. So let's crack on, and as I say, thanks for joining and do put comments in. The Aviva Premiership this season to me has felt not as strong as previous seasons. I think that Tim Cocker on the HSS podcast suggested this and was shot down by JB and Phil, but I think I agree with him here. Previous seasons it's felt like there have been 5 or 6 teams competing to get into the playoffs, whereas this season it feels much more like there are 3 teams in the playoffs and then it's going to be the least worst of everyone else getting in. Rather than sort of 5 or 6 teams trying to fight it out for it, which might sound a little bit strange, but let's just have a look at this then. So we've got Leicester are currently in 4th, and they've sacked 2 directors of rugby mid-season. That's, I think, is pretty much unprecedented. We've had recent sackings of DORs and coaches, both in Super Rugby and in the Aviva Premiership, but I don't think we've ever seen anyone sack 2 in one season. So they must think they're having a pretty awful time, and they're in 4th for the playoffs. Saints, a long time have been in the top 6. They've just dropped out of it now. Going to be sort of fighting it out for, along with Leicester, for those playoff spots. I'm getting DMs and people talking about whether Amanda should be sacked as well, and a lot of disgruntled Saints fans, and they're fighting, they're sort of in the scrap for a playoff spot. So I just know, to me, it just feels like it's not as competitive. The quality of the sides has dropped off, whereas last season they were dominating or doing very well in Europe, and also seem to be much more fighting it out in the top. At the bottom end of the league, Bristol again have pretty much gone. They haven't gone as early as London Welsh, so at that end I think it's been perhaps a bit better, and we've had a couple of stutters into life of Bristol, so I think the relegation, the bottom side, has been better this season, but the top end, or the middle to top end, doesn't feel so great. The top 14 is pretty similar, and no great shakes either. When you think that Toulon are in 4th in the table, and they've only won half their games, and they've lost half their games. To be in the playoffs and to not have a winning record just seems crazy. And you think about Pau, they're in 6th with a negative points difference. They've given up more points than they've scored, and somehow they've scraped into 6th. Bordeaux have got a losing record and are in the top half of the table as well, over in the top 14. So it does seem to be both the Aviva Premiership and the top 14, to my mind, seem to have had a bit of a hangover after a kind of storming 2015-2016 season. Now, I'm not really sure what this is down to. Is it some sort of mid-World Cup lulls? Have a lot of players they didn't have that off-season and managed to carry it through last season, but found the summer tours too much, and then coming into this season are just worn out? Is there a player welfare side of things here that's impacting it, and it's just lots of rugby has caught up with them? If we look over into the Pro 12 in Ireland, Ireland do look after their players a lot better, resting them, etc. And we've seen a resurgence in Munster and Leinster, especially this season compared to last season. And I must admit, this bit has all been done on the fly. I hadn't really thought this through before this chat. So please, those of you watching live, please do put comments in and your thoughts on this as to what the reasoning behind it is. But for me, maybe the Irish sides have looked after their players, got them fresher for this season, and we're seeing the benefit of that with Munster and Leinster both challenging back in Europe again. Last year we were talking about that basically the Pro 12 sides, they didn't have the financial might to compete, and were basically this was the end of them competing in the European competitions, and yet they're back strong again this year with 3 of the quarter finalists. Whereas the English, the English and the French sides, the players have gone through. They so had that long season last season where they came straight out of the Rugby World Cup, had been in training camps and had had over 12 months worth of games, went straight into for England touring Australia and for France touring Argentina. Obviously the French top 14 season starts so early, so they were back in training pretty much straight away after that tour. England, they do have that mandatory 5-week break, which so they had to have some rest before going back into pre-season, but then it was back into the grind with obviously your November internationals and the Six Nations as well. So one of the things I did think last season, paradoxically, was some of the players that had gone off to the Six Nations came back better rested because actually they'd had the weeks off in between, and they'd also had and some of them hadn't played full games. If you look at this season though, and the squad seemed to stay pretty similar. There was a bit of rotation against Italy because obviously they were so weak, but otherwise players have played quite a lot of rugby coming into this part of the season. The other, and I've just gone blank, I had a point there to make and I've just lost it. So, but there we go. So that's my thoughts. I do think this is not a vintage Aviva Premiership season. Perhaps it's down to the player welfare and they need a better window and a bit more rest. If we look at the new calendar, that's going to get even less happening because all of the Aviva Premiership games are going to be outside of the international windows, and the players will be playing the maximum that they are contractually allowed to do so. So I think we could be seeing more of this going forwards, and that the teams with that depth in squads that we see in Saracens, Wasps and Exeter can afford to rest and rotate their players a bit more, and the other squads that don't have that depth really are going to perhaps struggle in that kind of way. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please do share with your friends, retweet it, or if you're on YouTube, give it the old thumbs up. As I say, support me with my Patreon link above. And finally, I'll be back tomorrow talking about those DORs that have been sacked, and whether we are heading into a more football kind of style thing. Oh, and don't forget, comments below. Always good fun to chat.